It was a routine speech we got during our first day of basic training, delivered by a wiry little lieutenant. Men, up to now you've been good, clean American boys with an American's love for sportsmanship and fair play. We're here to change that. Our job is to make you the meanest, dirtiest bunch of scrappers in the history of the world. From now on, you can forget the Marquess of Queensberry rules and every other set of rules. Anything and everything goes. Never hit a man above the belt when you can kick him below it. Make the bastards scream. Kill him any way you can. Kill, kill, kill. Do you understand? His talk was greeted with nervous laughter and general agreement that he was right. Didn't Hitler and Tojo say the Americans were a bunch of softies? Ha! They'll find out. And of course, Germany and Japan did find out. A toughened up democracy poured forth a scalding fury that could not be stopped. It was a war of reason against barbarism, supposedly, with the issues at stake on such a high plane that most of our feverish fighters had no idea why they were fighting, other than that the enemy was a bunch of bastards. A new kind of war, with all destruction, all killing approved. Germans would ask, "Why are you Americans fighting us?" "I don't know, but we're sure beating the hell out of you," was the stock answer. A lot of people relished the idea of a total war. It had a modern ring to it, in keeping with our spectacular technology. To them, it was like a football game. Give 'em the axe, the axe, the axe. 3 small-town merchants' wives, middle-aged and plump, gave me a ride when I was hitchhiking home from Camp Atterbury. "Did you kill a lot of them Germans?" asked the driver, making cheerful small talk. I told her I didn't know. This was taken for modesty. As I was getting out of the car, one of the ladies patted me on the shoulder in motherly fashion. "I'll bet you'd like to get over and kill some of them dirty Japs now, wouldn't you?" We exchanged knowing winks. I didn't tell those simple souls that I had been captured after a week at the front, and more to the point, what I knew and thought about killing dirty Germans, about total war. The reason for my being sick at heart then and now has to do with an incident that received cursory treatment in the American newspapers. In February 1945, Dresden, Germany, was destroyed, and with it over 100,000 human beings. I was there. Not many know how tough Americans got. I was among a group of 150 infantry privates captured in the Bulge breakthrough and put to work in Dresden. Dresden, we were told, was the only major German city to have escaped bombing so far. That was in January 1945. She owed her good fortune to her unwarlike countenance. Hospitals, breweries, food processing plants, surgical supply houses, ceramics, musical instrument factories, and the like. Since the war, hospitals had become her prime concern. Every day, hundreds of wounded came into the tranquil sanctuary from the east and the west. At night, we would hear the dull rumble of distant air raids. "Germans is getting it tonight," we used to say, and speculated what it might be like to be under the yawning bomb bays and the bright young men with their dials in the crosshairs. Thank heaven we're in an open city, we thought, and so thought the thousands of refugees, women, children, and old men who came in a forlorn stream from the smoldering wreckage of Berlin, Leipzig, Breslau, Munich. They flooded the city to twice its normal population. There was no war in Dresden. True, planes came over nearly every day and the sirens wailed, but the planes were always en route elsewhere. The alarms furnished a relief period in a tedious day's work, a social event, a chance to gossip in the shelters. The shelters, in fact, were not much more than a gesture, casual recognition of the national emergency. Wine cellars and basements with benches in them and sandbags blocking the windows for the most part. There were a few more adequate bunkers in the center of the city, close to the government offices, but nothing like the staunch subterranean fortress that rendered Berlin impervious to her daily pounding. Dresden had no reason to prepare for the attack, and thereby hangs a beastly tale. Dresden was surely among the world's most lovely cities. Her streets were broad, lined with shade trees. She was sprinkled with countless little parks and statuary. She had marvelous old churches, libraries, museums, theaters, art galleries, beer gardens, a zoo, and a renowned university. It was at one time a tourist paradise. They would be far better informed on this city's delights than I am, but the impression I have is that in Dresden, in the physical city, were the symbols of the good life, pleasant, honest, and intelligent. In the swastika's shadows, those symbols of dignity and hope of mankind stood waiting, monuments to truth. The accumulated treasure of hundreds of years, Dresden spoke eloquently of those things excellent in European civilization wherein our debt lies deep. I was a prisoner, hungry, dirty, and full of hate for our captors, but I loved that city and saw the blessed wonder of her past and the rich promise of her future. In February 1945, American bombers reduced this treasure to crushed stones and embers, disemboweled her with high explosives, and cremated her with incendiaries. The atom bomb may represent a fabulous advance, but it is interesting to note that primitive TNT and thermite managed to exterminate in one bloody night more people than died in the whole London Blitz. Fortress Dresden fired a dozen shots at our airmen. Once back at their bases and sipping hot coffee, they probably remarked, "Flak unusually light tonight. Well, guess it's time to turn in." Captured British pilots from a tactical fighter unit covering frontline troops used to chide those who had flown heavy bombers on city raids with, "How on earth did you stand the stink of boiling urine and burning perambulators?" A perfectly routine piece of news. "Last night our planes attacked Dresden. All planes returned safely. The only good German is a dead one. Over 100,000 evil men, women, and children, the able-bodied, were at the fronts, forever purged of their sins against humanity." By chance, I met a bombardier who had taken part in the attack. "We hated to do it," he told me. The night they came over, we spent in an underground meat locker in a slaughterhouse. We were lucky, for it was the best shelter in town. Giants stalked the earth above us. First came the soft murmur of their dancing on the outskirts, then the grumbling of their prodding towards us, and finally the ear-splitting crashes of their heels upon us, and thence to the outskirts again. Back and forth they swept, saturation bombing. I screamed, and I wept, and I clawed at the walls of our shelter, an old lady told me. I prayed to God to please, please, dear God, stop them. But he didn't hear me. No power could stop them. On they came, wave after wave. There was no way we could surrender, no way to tell them we couldn't stand it anymore. There was nothing anyone could do but sit and wait for morning. Her daughter and grandson were killed. Our little prison was burned to the ground. We were to be evacuated to an outlying camp occupied by the South African prisoners. Our guards were a melancholy lot, aged Volksstürmers and disabled veterans. Most of them were Dresden residents and had friends and families somewhere in the Holocaust. A corporal who had lost an eye after 2 years on the Russian front ascertained before we marched that his wife, his 2 children, and both of his parents had been killed. He had 1 cigarette. He shared it with me. One march to new quarters took us on the city's edge. It was impossible to believe that anyone survived in its heart. Ordinarily, the day would have been cold, but occasional gusts from the colossal inferno made us sweat. And ordinarily, the day would have been clear and bright, but an opaque and towering cloud turned the noon to twilight. A grim procession clogged the outbound highways, people with blackened faces streaked with tears, some bearing wounded, some bearing dead. They gathered in the fields. None spoke. A few with Red Cross armbands did what they could for the casualties. Settled with the South Africans, we enjoyed a week without work. At the end of its communications were reestablished with higher headquarters, and we were ordered to hike 7 miles to the area hardest hit. Nothing in the district had escaped the fury. A city of jagged building shells, of splintered statuary and shattered trees. Every vehicle stopped, gnarled, and burned, left to rust or rot in the path of the frenzied might. The only sounds other than our own were those of falling plaster and their echoes. I cannot describe the desolation properly, but I can give an idea of how it made us feel. In the words of a delirious British soldier in a makeshift PW hospital, "It's frightening, I tell you. I would walk down one of them bloody streets and feel 1,000 eyes on the back of me head. I would hear 'em whispering behind me. I would turn around to look at 'em and there wouldn't be a bloomin' soul in sight. You can feel 'em and you can hear 'em, but there's never anybody there." We know what he said was so. For salvage work, we were divided into small crews, each under a guard. Our ghoulish mission was to search for bodies. It was a rich hunting that day, and the many thereafter. We started on a small scale, here a leg, there an arm, and an occasional baby, but struck a mother lode before noon. We cut way through a basement wall to discover a reeking hash of over 100 human beings. Flame must have swept through before the building's collapse sealed the exits, because the flesh of those within resembled the texture of prunes. Our job, it was explained, was to wade into the shambles and bring forth the remains. Encouraged by cuffing and guttural abuse, wade in we did. We did exactly that, for the floor was covered with an unsavory broth, birth force from water mains and viscera. A number of victims, not killed outright, had attempted to escape through a narrow emergency exit. At any rate, there were several bodies packed tightly into the passageway. Their leader had made it halfway up the steps before he was buried up to his neck in falling brick and plaster. He was about 15, I think. It is with some regret that I hear besmirch the nobility of our airmen, but boys, you killed an appalling lot of women and children. The shelter I have described and innumerable others like it were filled with them. We had to exhume their bodies and carry them to mass funeral pyres in the parks, so I know. The funeral pyre technique was abandoned when it became apparent how great was the toll. There was not enough labor to do it nicely, so a man with a flamethrower was sent down instead, and he cremated them where they lay, burned alive, suffocated, crushed, men, women, and children indiscriminately killed. For all the sublimity of the cause for which we fought, we surely created a Beslin of our own. The method was impersonal, but the result was equally cruel and heartless. That, I am afraid, is the sickening truth. When we had become used to the darkness, the odor, the carnage, we began musing as to what each of the corpses had been in life. It was a sordid game. Rich man, poor man, beggar, thief. Some had fat purses and jewelry, others had precious foodstuffs. A boy had his dog still leashed to him. Renegade Ukrainians in German uniform were in charge of our operations in the shelters proper. They were roaring drunk from adjacent wine cellars and seemed to enjoy their job hugely. It was a profitable one, for they stripped each body of valuables before we carried it to the street. Death became so commonplace that we could joke about our dismal burdens and cast them about like so much garbage. Not so with the first of them, especially the young. We had lifted them out onto the stretchers with care, lying them out with some semblance of funeral dignity in their last resting place before the pyre. But our odd and sorrowful propriety gave way, as I said, to rank callousness. At the end of a grisly day, we would smoke and survey the impressive heap of dead accumulated. One of us flipped his cigarette butt into the pile. "Hell's bells," he said. "I'm ready for death any time he wants to come after me." A few days after the raid, the siren screamed again. The listless and heartsick survivors were showered this time with leaflets. I lost my copy of the epic, but remember that it ran something like this. "To the people of Dresden, we were forced to bomb your city because of the heavy military traffic your railroad facilities have been carrying. We realize that we haven't always hit our objectives. Destruction of anything other than military objectives was unintentional, unavoidable fortunes of war." That explained the slaughter to everyone's satisfaction, I'm sure. But it aroused no little contempt for the American bomb site. It is a fact that 48 hours after the last B-17 had droned west for a well-earned rest, Labor battalions had swarmed over the damaged rail yards and restored them to nearly normal service. None of the rail bridges over the Elbe was knocked out of commission. Bomb site manufacturers should blush to know that their marvelous devices laid bombs down as much as 3 miles wide of what the military claimed to be aiming for. The leaflet should have said, "We hit every blessed church, hospital, school, museum, theater, your university, the zoo, and every apartment building in town. But we honestly weren't trying hard to do it. C'est la guerre. So sorry. Besides, saturation bombing is all the rage these days, you know." There was a tactical significance. Stop the railroads. An excellent maneuver, no doubt, but the technique was horrible. The planes started kicking high explosives and incendiaries through their bomb bays at the city limits. And for all the patterns their hits presented, they must have been briefed by a Ouija board. Tabulate the loss against gain. Over 100,000 non-combatants in a magnificent city destroyed by bombs dropped wide of the stated objectives. The railroads were knocked out for roughly 2 days. The Germans counted it the greatest loss of life suffered in any single raid. The death of Dresden was a bitter tragedy, needlessly and willfully executed. The killing of children, Jerry children or Jap children, or what other enemies of the future may hold for us, can never be justified. The facile reply to such groans such as mine is the most hateful of all cliches, fortunes of war, and another, they asked for it. All they understood is force. Who asked for it? The only thing who understands is force? Believe me, it is not easy to rationalize the stamping out of vineyards where the grapes of wrath are stored when gathering up babies in bushel baskets or helping a man dig where he thinks his wife may be buried. Certainly the enemy military and industrial installations should have been blown flat, and woe unto those foolish enough to seek shelter near them. But the "get tough America" policy, the spirit of revenge, the approbation of all destruction and killing has earned us a name for obscene brutality and the cost of the world, the possibility of Germans becoming a peaceful and intellectually fruitful nation in anything but the most remote future. Our leaders had a carte blanche as to what they might or might not destroy. Their mission was to win the war as quickly as possible, and while they were admirably trained to just do that, their decisions as to the fate of certain priceless world heirlooms, in one case Dresden, were not always judicious. When late in the war, with the Wehrmacht breaking up on all fronts, our planes were sent to destroy this last major city, I doubt if the question was asked, how will this tragedy benefit us? And how will that benefit compare with the ill effects in the long run? Dresden, a beautiful city, built in the art spirit, symbol of an admirable heritage, so anti-Nazi that Hitler visited it but twice during his whole reign. Food and hospital centers so bitterly needed now, plowed under and salt strewn in the furrows. There can be no doubt that the Allies fought on the side of the right, and the Germans and Japanese on the side of the wrong. World War II was fought for near holy motives, but I stand convinced that the brand of justice in which we dealt, wholesale bombings of civilian populations, was blasphemous. That the enemy did it first has nothing to do with the moral problem. What I saw of our air war as the European conflict neared an end had the earmarks of being an irrational war for war's sakes. Soft citizens of American democracy learned to kick a man below the belt and make the bastard scream. The occupying Russians, when they discovered that we were Americans, embraced us and congratulated us on the complete desolation our planes had wrought. We accepted their congratulations with good grace and proper modesty, but I felt then, as I feel now, that I would have given my life to save Dresden for the world's generations to come. That is how everyone should feel about every city on earth. This next chapter is called Great Day, or short story, rather. When I was 16, folks took me for 25, and one full-grown woman from the city swore I must be 30. I was big all over, had whiskers like steel wool. I sure wanted to see something besides Luverne, Indiana, and that ain't saying Indianapolis would have held me neither. So I lied about my age and I joined the army of the world. Didn't nobody cry. There wasn't no flags, there wasn't no bands. It wasn't like in olden times where a young boy like me to be going away to maybe get his head blowed off for democracy. Wasn't nobody there at the depot but Ma, and Ma was mad. She thought the army of the world was just for bums who couldn't find respectable work nowheres. Seems like yesterday, but that was back in the year 2037. You keep away from them Zulus, Ma said. There's more'n just Zulus in the army of the world, Ma, I told her. There's folks from every country there is. But anyone born outside of Floyd County is a Zulu to Ma. Well, anyways, she said, I expect they'll feed you good with world taxes as high as they is. And as long as you're bound and determined to go off with them Zulus and all, I expect I ought to be glad there ain't no other armies roaming around trying to shoot you. I'll be keeping the peace, Ma, I said. Won't never be no terrible wars no more with just one army. Don't that make you proud? Makes me proud of what folks have done for peace, Ma said. That don't make me love no army. It's a new high-class kind of army, Ma, I said. You ain't even allowed to curse, and if you don't go to church regular, you don't get no dessert. Ma just shook her head. You just remember one thing, she said. You remember you was high class. She didn't kiss me. She shook my hand. As long as I had you, she said, you was. But when I sent Ma a shoulder patch for my first outfit after basic training, I heard she showed it around like it was a picture postcard from God. Wasn't nothing but a piece of blue felt with a picture of a gold clock stitch in it, and green lightning was coming out of the clock. I heard Ma was shooting off her bazoo to everybody about how her boy was in a time screen company, just like she knowed what a time screen company was, and just like everybody knowed it was the grandest thing in the whole army of the world. Well, we was the first time screen company, and the last one, unless they get the bugs out of the time machines. What we was supposed to do was so secret we couldn't even find out what it was till it was too late to go over the hill. Captain Poritsky was the boss, and he wouldn't tell us nothing except we should be very proud since there was only 200 men on the face of the earth entitled to wear them clocks. He used to be a football player at Notre Dame, and he looked like a stack of cannonballs on a courthouse lawn. He used to like to feel himself all over while he talked to us. He used to like to feel how hard all them cannonballs was. He said he was real honored to be leading such a fine body of men on such an important mission. He said we'd find out what the mission was on maneuvers at a place called Chateau Thierry in France. Sometimes generals would come look at us like we was going to do something sad and beautiful, but nobody didn't say boo about no time machine. When we got to Chateau Thierry, everybody was waiting for us. That's when we found out we was supposed to be something extra desperate. Everybody wanted to see the killers with the clocks on their sleeves. Everybody wanted to see the big show we was going to put on. If we looked wild when we got there, we got wilder as time went on. We still couldn't find out what a time screen company was supposed to do. Wasn't no use asking. Captain Poritsky, sir, I said to him, just as respectful as I could be. I hear we are going to demonstrate some new kind of attack tomorrow at dawn. Smile like you was happy and proud, soldier, he said to me. It's true, Captain, sir, I said. Our platoon done elected me to come ask you if we couldn't find out now what we is supposed to do. We want to kind of get ready, sir. Soldier, Poritsky said. Ever a man in that platoon got morale and esprit de corps and 3 grenadiers and a rifle and a bayonet and 100 rounds of ammunition, don't he? Yes, sir, I said. Soldier, Poritsky said. That platoon is ready. And to show you how much faith I got in that platoon, it is going to lead the attack. Well, he said, ain't you gonna say thank you, sir? I done it. "And to show how much faith I got in you, soldier," he said, "you are going to be the first man in the first squad in the first platoon. Ain't you going to say thank you, sir?" I done it again. "Just pray the scientist is as ready as you are, soldier," Paritsky said. "There's scientists mixed up in it, sir," I said. "End of interview, soldier," Paritsky said. "Come to me attention, soldier." I done it. "Salute," Paritsky said. I done it. "Forward arch," he said. Off I went. So there I was on the night before the big demonstration, ignorant and scared and homesick, on guard duty in a tunnel in France. I was on guard with a kid named Earl Sterling from Salt Lake. "Scientist is going to help us, huh?" Earl said to me. "That's what he said," I told him. "I'd just as soon have not knowed that much," Earl said. Up above ground, a big shell went off and liked to burst our eardrums. There was a barrage going on up above, like giants walking around, kicking the world apart. They was shells from our guns, of course, playing like they was the enemy, playing like they was sore as hell about everything. Everybody was down deep in the tunnels, so wasn't nobody gonna get hurt. But wasn't nobody enjoying all that noise but Captain Paritsky, and he was crazy as a bedbug. "Stimulated this, stimulated that," Earl said. "Them ain't stimulated shells, and I ain't stimulated being as scared of them neither." "Paritsky says it's music," I said. "They say this is the way it really was, back in the real wars," Earl said. "Don't see how nobody stayed alive." "Holes give a lot of protection," I said. "But back in the old days, didn't hardly nobody but generals get down in holes this good," Earl said. "The soldiers had shallow little things with no roof over 'em, and when the orders came, they had to get out of them holes, and orders like that was coming all the time." I expect they kept close to the ground," I said. "How close can you get to the ground?" Earl wanted to know. "Some places up there, the grass is cut down like somebody done use a lawnmower. Ain't a tree leaf standing, big holes everywhere. How come folks didn't just go crazy in all them real worlds? Or quit?" "Folks are funny," I said. "Sometimes I don't think so," Earl said. Another big shell went off, then two little ones, real quick. "You've seen that Russian company's collection?" Earl said. "Heard about it," I said. "They got close to 100 skulls," Earl said. "Got 'em lined up on the shelf like honeydew melons." "Crazy," I said. "Yeah, collecting skulls like that," Earl said. "But they can't hardly help but collect 'em. I mean, they can't hardly dig in any direction and not find skulls at all. Something big must have happened over there." "Something big happened all through here," I told him. "This here's a very famous battlefield from the World War. This here is where the Americans whipped the Germans," Paritsky told me. "Two of them skulls got shrapnel in 'em," Earl said. "You seen them?" "Nope." "Shake 'em and you can hear the shrapnel rattle around inside. You can see the holes where the shrapnel went in. You know what they ought to do with them poor skulls? They ought to get a slew of chaplains from every religion there is. They ought to give them poor skulls a decent funeral and bury them someplace they won't never be bothered again." "It ain't like they was people anymore," Earl said. "It ain't like they wasn't never people," I said. "They gave up their lives so our fathers and our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers could live. The least we can do is treat their poor bones right." "Yeah, but wasn't some of them trying to kill our great-grandfathers or whoever it was?" Earl said. "Well, the Germans thought they was improving things," I said. "Everybody thought they was improving things. Their hearts were in the right place. It's the thought that counts." The canvas curtain at the top of the tunnel opened up, and Captain Paritsky came down from the outside. He was taking his time, like there wasn't nothing out there worse than a warm drizzle. "Ain't it kind of dangerous going out there, sir?" I asked him. He didn't have to go out there. There was tunnels running from airwares to airwares, and wasn't nobody supposed to go outside while the barrage was on. Ain't this a rather dangerous profession we picked of our own free will, soldier? He asked me. He put the back of his hand under my nose, and I'd seen there was a long cut across it. Shrapnel, he said. He grinned, and then he stuck the cut in his mouth and sucked it. Then after he'd drunk enough blood to hold himself a while, he looked at me and Earl up and down. Soldier, he said to me, where's your bayonet? I felt around my belt. I'd done forgot my bayonet. Soldier, what if the enemy was to all of a sudden drop in? Paritsky done a dance like he was gathering nuts in May. Sorry, fellas, you wait right here while I go get my bayonet. That what you'd say, soldier? He asked me. I shook my head. When the chips are down, a bayonet is a soldier's best friend, Paritsky said. That's when a professional soldier is happiest, on account of that's when he gets too close with the enemy. Ain't that so? Yes, sir, I said. You been collecting skulls, soldier? Paritsky said. No, sir, I said. Wouldn't hurt you none to take it up, Paritsky said. No, sir, I said. There's a reason why every one of them soldiers died, soldier. They wasn't good soldiers. They wasn't professionals. They made mistakes. They didn't learn their lessons good enough. Reckon not, sir, I said. Maybe you think maneuvers is tough, soldier, but they ain't near tough enough, Paritsky said. If I was in charge, everybody'd be out there taking that bombardment. Only way to get professional outfits is to get 'em blooded. Blooded, sir? Get some men killed so's the rest can learn, Paritsky said. Hell, this ain't no army. They got so many safety rules and doctors, I ain't even seen a hangnail for 6 years. You ain't gonna turn out professionals that way. No, sir. The professional has seen everything and ain't surprised by nothing, Paritsky said. Well, tomorrow, soldier, you're gonna see real soldiering, the likes of which ain't been seen for 100 years. Gas, rolling barrages, firefights, bayonet duels, hand to hand. Ain't you glad, soldier? Ain't I what, sir? I said. Ain't you glad? Paritsky said. I looked at Earl, then back at the captain. Oh, yes, sir, I said. I shook my head real slow and heavy. Yes, sir, I said. Yes, indeedy do. When you're in the army of the world, with all the fancy new weapons they got, there ain't but one thing to do. You got to believe what the officers tell you, even if it don't make sense. And the officers, they've got to believe what the scientists tell them. Things has got far beyond the common man, and maybe they always was. When a chaplain hollered at us enlisted men about how we got to have great faith that don't ask no questions, he was carrying coals to Newcastle. When Paritsky finally done told us that we was going to attack with the help of a time machine, there wasn't no intelligent ideas an ordinary soldier like me could have. I just sat there like a bump on a log and looked at the bayonet stud on my rifle. I leaned over so's the front of my helmet rested on the muzzle, and I looked at that there bayonet stud like it was a wonder of the world. All 200 of us in the time screen company was in a big dugout listening to Paritsky. Wasn't nobody looking at him. He was just too happy about what was going to happen, feeling himself over like he hoped he wasn't dreaming. Man, that crazy captain said, at 0500 hours, the artillery will lay down 2 lines of flares 200 yards apart. Them flares will mark the edges of the beam of the time machine. We will attack between them flares. Men, between them lines of flares, it will be today and July 18th, 1918, both at the same time. I kissed that bayonet stud. I like the taste of oil and iron in small amounts, but that ain't encouraging nobody to bottle it. Man, you're going to see some things out there that'd turn a civilian's hair white. You're going to see the Americans counterattacking the Germans back in olden times at Chateau Thierry. My, he was happy. Man, he said, it's going to be a slaughterhouse in hell. I moved my head up and down so's my helmet acted like a pump. It pumped air down over my forehead. At a time like that, little things can be extra nice. Men, I hate to tell soldiers not to be scared. I hate to tell them there ain't nothing to be scared of. It's an insult to them. But the scientists tell me 1918 can't do nothing to us, and we can't do nothing to 1918. We'll be ghosts to them, and they'll be ghosts to us. We'll be walking through them, and they'll be walking through us like we was all smoke. I blowed across the muzzle of my rifle. I didn't get a tune out of it. Good thing I didn't, because it would have broken up the whole meeting. Men, Pritzky said, I just wish you could take your chances back in 1918. Take your chances with the worst they could throw at you. Them as lived through it as would-be soldiers in the finest sense of the word. Nobody argued with him. Man, that great military scientist said, I reckon you can imagine the effect on our enemy when he sees the battlefield crawling with all them ghosts from 1918. He ain't going to know what to shoot at. Pritzky busted out laughing, and it took him a while to pull himself back together. Men, we'll be creeping through them ghosts. When we reach the enemy, make him wish to God we was ghosts too, and make him sorry he was ever born. This enemy he was talking about was nothing but a line of bamboo poles with rags tied to them, about half a mile away. You wouldn't believe a man could hate bamboo and rags the way Pritzky done. Man, Pritzky said, if anybody's thinking of going AWOL here, here's your golden opportunity. All you got to do is cross one of them lines of flares, go through the edge of the beam, they'll disappear into 1918 for real. Won't be nothing ghostly about it, and the MP ain't been born who's crazy enough to go after you on account of nobody who ever crosses over can never come back. I cleaned between my front teeth with my rifle sight. I figured out all by myself that a professional soldier was happiest when he could bite somebody. I knowed I wasn't never going to reach them heights. Men, Pritzky said, the mission of this here time machine company ain't no different from the mission of every company since time began. The mission of this here time screen company is to kill. Any questions? We had all done had the articles of war read to us. We all knew asking sensible questions was worse than killing your own mother with an axe. So there wasn't no questions. Don't expect there ever has been. Lock and load, Pritzky said. We done it. Fix bayonets, Pritzky said. We done it. Shall we go, girls? Pritzky said. Oh, that man noticed psychology backwards and forwards. I expect there's a big difference between officers and enlisted men. Calling us girls instead of boys when we was really boys just made us so mad we couldn't hardly see straight. We was going out and tear up bamboo and rags till there wasn't going to be no more fish poles or crazy quilts for centuries. Being in the beam of that there time machine was a cross between flu, wearing bifocals that was made for somebody else who couldn't see good, and being inside a guitar. Until they improves it, it ain't never going to be safe or popular. We didn't see no folks from 1918 at first. All we'd seen was their holes in barbed wire where there wasn't no holes in barbed wire no more. We could walk over them holes like they had glass roofs over 'em. We could walk through that barbed wire without getting our pants tore. They wasn't ours, they was 1918's. There was thousands of soldiers watching us, folks from every country there was. The show we put on for 'em was just pitiful. That time machine beam made us sick to our stomachs and half blind. We was supposed to whoop it up and holler to show how professional we was, but we got out there between them flares and didn't hardly know when to let out a peep for fear they'd throw up. We was supposed to advance aggressively, only we couldn't tell what belonged to us and what was 1918's. We'd walk around things that wasn't there and fall over things that was there. If I'd been an observer, I would have said we was comical. I was the first man in the first squad of the first platoon of that time screen company, and wasn't but one man in front of me. He was our noble captain. He only hollered one thing at his fearless troops, and I thought he hollered that to make us even more bloodthirsty than we was. So long, Boy Scouts, he hollered. Write your mothers regular and wipe your noses when they runs. Then he bent over and he run off across no man's land as fast as he could go. I'd done my best to stick with him for the honor of the enlisted men. We was both falling down and getting up like a couple of drunks, just beating ourselves to pieces on that battlefield. He never looked around to see how me and the rest was doing. I thought he didn't want nobody to see how green he was. I kept trying to tell him we'd done left everybody way behind, but the race took every bit of breath I had. When he headed off to one side towards a line of flares, I figured he wanted to get into the smoke where folks couldn't see him so he could get sick in private. I had just fell into the smoke after him when a barrage from 1918 hit. That poor old world. She rocked and rolled. She spit and tore. She boiled and burned. Dirt and steel from 1918 flew through Paritsky and me every which way. "Get up!" Paritsky hollered at me. "That's 1918! Can't hurt you none!" "I would if I could!" I hollered back at him. He made like he was going to kick me in the head. "Get up, soldier," he said. I done it. "Get back with the rest of them Boy Scouts," he said. He pointed through a hole in the smoke, pointed back to where we'd come from. I'd seen the rest of the company was showing them thousands of observers how experts laid down and quivered. "That's where you belong," Paritsky said. "This here's my show, and it's a solo." "Beg pardon," I said. I turned my head to follow a 1918 boulder that had just flew through both our heads. "Look at me!" he hollered. I'd done it. "Here's where we separates the men from the boys, soldier," he said. "Yes, sir," I said. "Can't hardly nobody run as fast as you can." "I ain't talking about running," he said. "I'm talking about fighting." Oh, it was a crazy conversation. 1918 tracers had started going through us. I thought he was talking about fighting bamboo and rags. "Ain't nobody feeling very good, Captain, but I expect we'll win. I mean, I'm going through these here flares to 1918. Ain't nobody else man enough to do that. Now get the hell out of here." I seen he wasn't fooling a bit. He really did think that it'd be grand if he could wave a flag and stop a bullet, even if it was in some war that had been over for 100 years or more. He wanted to get in his lick, even if the ink on the peace treaties was so faded you could hardly read them no more. "Captain, I ain't nothing but an enlisted man, and an enlisted man ain't even supposed to hint, but Captain, I don't think that makes good sense. I was born to fight. I'm rusting out inside. Captain, everything there is to fight for has already been won. We got peace, we got freedom, everybody everywhere like brothers, and everybody got nice houses and chicken on Sunday." He didn't hear me. He was walking towards the line of flares, towards the edge of the time machine beam where the smoke from the flares was the thickest. He stopped just before he got into 1918 forever. He looked down at something, and I thought maybe he had done found a bird's nest or a daisy in no man's land. What he'd found wasn't neither. I went up to him and seen he's just standing over a 1918 shell hole, just like he was hanging in air. There was 2 dead men in that sorry hole, 2 live ones and mud. I'd known that 2 was dead on account of one didn't have no head and the other was blowed in 2. If you got a heart and you come on something like that in the thick smoke, ain't nothing else in this universe going to be real. There was no more army of the world. There was no more peace everlasting. There was no more Luverne, Indiana. There was no more time machine. There was just me, Paritsky, and the hole. If I ever was to have a child, this is what I'd tell it. "Child," I'd say, "don't never mess with time. Keep now, and then. And if you ever get lost in thick smoke, child, set still till it clears. Set still till you can see where you are, where you've been, and where you're going, child." I'd shake that child. "Child, you hear?" I'd say. "You listen to what your daddy says. He know. Ain't never gonna see no sweet child of mine, I expect. But I aims to feel one, smell one, and hear one. Damn if I don't." You could see where the 4 poor 1918 souls had been crawling around and around in that hole like snails crawling around the fishbowl. There was a track leading from each one, the live ones and the dead ones. The shell lit up in the hole and blowed up. When the mud fell back down, there wasn't but one man left alive. He turned over from his belly to his back, and he let his arms flop out. It was like he was offering his soft parts to 1918 so it could kill him easy if it wanted to kill him so bad. And then he seen us. He wasn't surprised to see us hanging there in air over him. Wasn't nothing that could surprise him no more. Real slow and clumsy, he dug his rifle out of the mud and aimed it at us. He smiled like he knowed who we was, like he knowed he couldn't hurt us none, like it was all a big joke. There wasn't no way a bullet could get through that rifle bore. It was so clogged with mud. The rifle blowed up. That didn't surprise him none neither. Didn't even seem to hurt. The smile he gave us, the smile about the joke, was still there when he laid back and died. The 1918 barrage stopped. Someone blowed a whistle from way far off. "What are you crying about, soldier?" Pritzky said. "I didn't know I was a captain," I said. My skin felt extra tight and my eyes was hot, but I didn't know I was crying. "You was and you are," he said. Then I really did cry. I knowed for sure I was just 16, knowed I wasn't nothing but an overgrown baby. I sat down and I swore I wouldn't get up again, even if the captain kicked my head off. "There they go!" Pritzky hollered real wild. "Look, soldier, look! Americans!" He filed his pistol off like it was the 4th of July. "Look!" I done it. Looked like a million men crossing the beam of the time machine. They'd come from nothing on one side, melt away to nothing on the other. Their eyes was dead. They put one foot in front of the other like somebody'd wound 'em up. All of a sudden, Captain Pritzky hauled me up like I didn't weigh nothing. "Come on, soldier, we're going with him." That crazy man drug me right through that line of flares. I screamed and I cried and I bit him, but it was too late. There wasn't no flares no more. There wasn't nothing but 1918 all around. I was 1918 for good. Then another barrage hit, and it was steel and high explosive, and I was flesh, and then was then, and steel and flesh was all balled up together. I woke up here. "What year is it?" I asked him. 1918, soldier, they said. "Where am I asked him. They told me I was in a cathedral that had been turned into a hospital. Wish I could see it. I can hear from the echoes how high and grand it is. I ain't no hero. With heroes all around me here, I don't embroider my record none. I never bayoneted or shot nobody, never throwed a grenade, never even seen a German unless them was Germans in that terrible hole. They should ought to have a special hospital for heroes, so heroes wouldn't have to lay next to the likes of me. When somebody new comes around to hear me talk, I always tell him right off that I wasn't in the war but 10 seconds before I was hit. I never did a thing to make the world safe for democracy, I tell him. When I got hit, I was crying like a baby and trying to kill my own captain. If a bullet hadn't killed him, I would have, and he was a fellow American. I would have too. And I tell him I'd desert back to the year 2037 too if I got half a chance. There's 2 court-martial offenses right there. But all these heroes here, they don't seem to care. "That's all right, buddy," they say. "You just go right on talking. If someone tries to court-martial you, we'll swear we seen you killing Germans with your bare hands and fire coming out of your ears." They likes to hear me talk. So I lay here blind as a bat, and I tell him how I got here. I tell him all the world things I see so clear inside my head. The army of the world, everybody like brothers everywhere, peace everlasting, nobody hungry, nobody is scared. That's how I come to got my nickname. Don't hardly nobody in the hospital know my real name. Don't know who thought of it first, but everybody calls me Great Day.